All right, next I just want to take you through the analysis flight data recorder assignment. Now, this is the assignment. It's in a Google spreadsheet, Google Sheet file. I'm going to go ahead over into this untitled one so we don't mess with the master document. Two things we're doing here. We're plotting latitude versus longitude, and then we're plotting altitude versus time. And then we want to think about what happened during the flight, right? We're essentially creating a map, and then we're creating a look at what happened to the aircraft vertically. So what happened to the aircraft horizontally and then vertically to get a sense of, from two-dimensional information, a sense of what the three-dimensional movement of the aircraft was. Now we're ignoring here the roll, pitch, and yaw data. This is a sample of some of the data that a flight data recorder would collect, but certainly not all of it. So we're going to go ahead and highlight these two columns here. Start us off with our latitude and longitude plot. Now remember, the longitudinal lines run vertically and the latitudinal lines run horizontally, right? They run laterally along the surface of the Earth. Longitudinal lines run vertically. Those longitudinal lines we would like to have intersect with the x-axis of the graph. The latitudinal lines we'd like to have intersect with the y-axis of the graph, right? So we're going to go ahead and plot the longitude lines on the x-axis and the latitude lines on the y-axis. So that's the reason for the order there. Now I'm going to come up to Insert, Chart, and I'm going to give it a minute to think. And look what it brought in for me. Now that's a column chart, not what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and click on here, and I'm going to come down to where I said Scatter. And there's my scatter chart. Now that looks kind of interesting. Let's take a look at the assumptions that Google made. So the longitude values are all roughly 116. So it's gone ahead and it's narrowed our field of view on the x-axis to roughly negative 116. Now on the y-axis, it's gone the full range from 0 to 40, even though all our values here, if you look down the latitude values, they're all from between 32 and 33. This view is a little bit more than we need. So what I'm going to do here, right, so if I click away, I'm going to go ahead and click on my graph. If this chart editor had gone away, so let's say we come from this point. If I click on my graph, if I double click on it, that chart editor comes back. If I click on the numbers here on the y-axis, if I click on those numbers, and I come over to the chart editor, notice there's a min and a max option. I can click on where it says min, and I go, okay, well, none of these values are less than 30, so let's go ahead and set the minimum to 30. Ooh, that's starting to look like something. Well, look, none of the data points are below 32. Well, let's just change the minimum value to 32. Gee, none of those minimum values are less than 32.3, maybe 32.4. Let's go 32.4. Well, look at that. We're starting to get a better picture of what on earth happened here. And notice it's already adjusted our maximum value down a little bit. I wonder if we could go 32.45 and kind of zoom in a little bit more, if you will. It looks like up here on the maximum, we could go maybe 32.1, 32.1. And really, whoop, that wasn't right. 32 point, we messed up, 32 point. Sorry, 33.1. I misread the number, so 33.1. All right, and really maximize our chart space here, right? So our minimum value is now 32.45. None of the dots are below that. And our maximum value is now 33.1, right? None of the values are above that. And now, if you're going to make a graph, this is not a good way to get a sense of where the how the data looks overall. We'd really like to see zeros in the corner, but really what we're making here is a map. So we're just looking at a segment of the world here in terms of our latitude and longitude data. Now, what we're going to need to do next is we need to add our axis labels and our chart title, right? So if I click away here and the editor goes away, if I double click on that again, notice at the top when the chart editor first opens, I have a setup option and I have a customize option. I'll go ahead and click customize. Notice I have the option to click chart and axis titles. Let's go ahead and pick that. For my chart title, I could say position. All right, now there's position. And then I could program in my horizontal axis title, and that's going to be longitude. And for my y-axis title, my vertical axis title, that's going to be latitude. And there we go. we have a graph, shows where the vehicle was in time over the ground. So let's go ahead and put that off to the side. Next thing we need to do, we need to plot altitude versus time. All right, so let's go ahead and insert our chart. And it picked a column chart. That's not what we want. I want a scatter plot. Whoa. Look, it goes back and forth over here on the x-axis. That's interesting. In fact, it starts at 0 and it goes up to 25,000. And here it goes from 0 to 2,500. What? If we come down to the bottom of our data stack, we can see that, interesting, the time goes up to 2143. The altimeter altitude, it gets up to the tens of thousands. That's interesting. So something that gets to the tens of thousands, this must be altitude, this must be time. That's not how I would like it to look. See, it picked the x-axis as the first thing I clicked on, the altitude values, and it picked the y-axis as the second thing I clicked on, the time values. Now I can change that here. I could say, hey, I would really like this to be altitude, and I can get rid of the time. And I'd really like this to be altitude, right? Remove that. I'd really like this to be time. So my x-axis is time and my y-axis is altitude. I'd really like that to be the case. And then from there, I would go customize. I go chart title axis, chart and axis titles. And my vertical axis title, again, is going to be altitude. I didn't specify units here. We could probably assume feet, but we won't. And my horizontal axis title is going to be time. We could probably assume it's seconds, but it could be minutes. Probably not hours. That wouldn't be relevant. It's probably fast-moving airplanes, either minutes or seconds. And then for the title, we're going to push altitude versus time. All right, there we've got our graph. Good to go. Now, I would just like to show you real quick. The reason Google, again, I mentioned this, the reason Google gave me my altitude as my X values instead of time, well, it's sensitive to what you click on first. So if I click on the time values, then I hold the control button to do this, and I click on the altitude values. If I go insert chart, and then I come back down and I say I want that to be a scatter plot, notice it picked correctly this time. All right, it's picked the first thing I clicked on as being the x-axis values, and the second thing I clicked on to be the y-axis values. Now, the other thing I just like to point out, right, if the shift buttons versus the control buttons, right? If I hold the shift button down and I click over here, I select multiple columns and everything in between. If I click on a column and I hold the control button down on the keyboard, I can just pick which ones I want, right? I don't have to get everything in the way. I can select multiple columns by holding down that control button. If I want to select everything within a range, I hold down the shift button and I click where I want that to end. All right, so just a quick sidebar there. Now I have a plot of the position along the ground of the vehicle and of the altitude above the ground of the vehicle. And I get a sense of what was going on. The thing maybe took off, went up and down, and up and down, and up and down, and up, and then way down, and then down a little bit more, and then back to 0. Interesting. Maybe it landed. I don't know. Or maybe it went back to some low altitude and went back home. Hard to know. Either way, it went up and down and back to the same altitude it started at. This is interesting. It doesn't look like the data ended. It doesn't look like the thing crashed. This looks like a bit of a loop here, or maybe it took off and went around and went along over here and then came back over here and it went there. Well, that's interesting. I wonder where it started. 116.116.687. So what would be nice is if we had the third dimension here with time, but we don't. So let's see, 116.7. Let's see, it looks like 116.7. Looks like maybe that first data point, 116.685, 116.685. That's that first data point. So this point is where it's starting. If we go down to the end, let's see where it ended, 116.687. Let's see, 116.687. Wow, so it's starting and ending from here. It's kind of going around. Looks like it does this loop. And as it's doing that, it's going up and down and following this course. And so it comes back to where it started and it comes back to the same starting altitude. So maybe there's an airport out there that didn't show up on the Google Maps and the thing came back and landed. So that's all very interesting, and we could talk about what happened during a flight. No real super solid right answer to what happened here, but based on this data, what does it look like happened? All right, so that's the end of this assignment. Now we would just write something here for what happened and then submit it.